This guy is incapable. I mean this. Leave aside the political angles. This guy is mentally and in conjunction with it physically unable, in my opinion, to handle the office of the presidency. Doesn't even matter what policies he's advocating for or against. He does not have the mental acuity or now the physical ability to handle the office of president. And they're talking about running him at 82 flipping years old.
This is amazing, everybody. So yesterday, you will recall that we were saying Joe Biden in his 60 Minutes interview over the weekend said the pandemic is over. He just said it straight. Here we go. Remember, can we remind everybody? Here's what he said.
Mr. President, first Detroit Auto Show in 3 years.
Yeah.
Is the pandemic over?
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over.
So he said the pandemic is over. That is
straightforward, as easy as it could be.
As straightforward as it is. There's a president of the United States saying the pandemic is over. Psych. It turns out that all the people around him, all the Biden handlers, the Biden interpreters, the people that say, oh, that mumbling that he did, oh, that was actually brilliant. He's sharp as a tack. Did you know that, Clay?
You should see him behind closed doors. I mean, he asked the most perceptive questions.
It's amazing. He starts.
Did you see him? The Buck, by the way, speaking of sharp as a tack, did you see that he had to sign the Queen's memorial book in England yesterday? And he pulled out cheat notes to write down what somebody else had already written for him. Did you see that video?
I didn't, because I didn't watch any of the Queen stuff. But
this is crazy. He can't even write his own condolence. He has to pull it out of his pocket and copy it.
But Clay, you don't understand. When nobody's around, when none of the press or anybody's there, he's reciting King Lear in 3 languages. He's a genius. You just have to remember this, everybody. That's what they tell us. It's so ridiculous. They are walking back. And I don't mean in 1 or 2 places, a whole bunch of policy officials, whatever. The Fauci himself says, and I quote, what he really meant is that the very severe stage of the pandemic of having 3,000 deaths a day, that stage is no longer present. Okay, that is not the same thing as saying the pandemic is over.
Correct.
Why is
and then pointing out on top of that, Buck, he also said nobody's wearing masks anymore. You see it everywhere. Like it wasn't like it was just a misspeak.
He leaned into it. He was trying to do a victory lap. Why is Fauci correcting the president of the United States on this? Start with that one. So if you want to know who really runs the show on the pandemic, because one day Fauci's, I'm just an advisor, one in a cast of millions, and the next day all of a sudden it's, tell the president to shut up. I got this. Like, he's in charge. We all know this. And you've got here the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, another health official.
Very different views there of the state of the pandemic. Is the pandemic over?
Well, Willie, it's good to see you as well. I actually don't think they're all that different. What the president's reflecting is the fact that we've made tremendous progress against COVID-19. We're in a very different place now than we were at the beginning of this pandemic, with significantly lower death rates. We have all of our children back in school. We have people able to go back to work, families and friends able to see each other. But he also said, we have more work to do on COVID, and that's right. And that's what Dr. Fauci and others have expressed as well.
No, actually what he said is the pandemic is over. But what's so interesting, Clay, is that administration officials, anonymously, told CNN, reported this morning, here it is, the president's comments do not mark a change in policy toward the administration's handling of the virus, and there are no plans to lift the public health emergency. So the president is saying the pandemic is over, but his White House is telling everybody in the press, we still have all the pandemic powers, though.
Yeah, and that's because you're exactly right. They don't want to give up the emergency powers, because it was only a few weeks ago, remember, that Joe Biden potentially spent $1 trillion in taxpayer money to try and cancel out student loans. And the justification for canceling out those student loans was what? COVID. And there's still a mandate that is in place all over the federal government for COVID shots. So if the pandemic is over, then everyone who refused to get the COVID shot should theoretically be able to come back into service, right? And that certainly no one new should be losing their jobs over this. But they know, first of all, this is evidence of why Joe Biden hadn't done an interview in 7 months. He hadn't sat down for an interview. And remember, this is a highly edited 60 Minutes puff piece that they were intending to do. And he's unable to answer basic questions. This was not a crazy idea that he might get asked, is the COVID pandemic over? Especially as he walks around the Detroit Auto Show with CBS, not wearing masks. 60 Minutes is there. And all of the gaffes, Buck, from this interview, every time Joe Biden opens his mouth, disaster ensues. He, first of all, effectively said that we would go to war with China if they invaded Taiwan. They had to walk that
It's not
back
the first time he's done that either.
What should Chinese President Xi know about your commitment to Taiwan?
We agree with what we signed on to a long time ago, and that there's a one China policy, that Taiwan makes their own judgments about their independence. We are not moving, we're not encouraging their being independent. That's their decision.
But would U.S. forces defend the island?
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
No, that's correct. And maybe in his defense, maybe that's intended to be some sort of continuation of the strategic ambiguity perspective. But when you say something and your own White House has to correct you right after, that's not a sign that you're in control of the messaging inside of your White House. He said inflation wasn't that big of a deal and wasn't growing that much, which was such a tone-deaf comment for anybody out there dealing with over 13% increases in grocery bills in the last year. We talked about the COVID pandemic. He also said he wasn't sure if he was going to run for president. I mean, these are all questions that you could easily, tee up, Buck. If you or I were going to get interviewed, I could tell you 6 things that one of us was going to get asked, and you can prep and you can prepare your answer so that you put it in the best context. He whiffed on all these. Even when he got asked about his mental acuity, Buck, he couldn't even answer in a way that made you think, oh, yeah, this guy is sharp. He said, oh, just look at my schedule when you are visible for like 5% of the day, and then you vanish. This guy is incapable. I mean this. Leave aside the political angles. This guy is mentally and in conjunction with it physically unable, in my opinion, to handle the office of the presidency. Doesn't even matter what policies he's advocating for or against. He does not have the mental acuity or now the physical ability to handle the office of president. And they're talking about running him at 82 flipping years old.
Yeah, and the notion the pandemic is over, on the one hand, first of all, it's been over for a long time for anybody who is emotionally well,
yes,
who is psychologically stable and living in reality. The pandemic has been over for a long time now. But beyond that, the Biden administration clearly wants to keep some, and I keep saying this to everybody, they're still fighting. They want to be able to bring back masks on planes. You know how you take your shoes off at the TSA, which is so stupid, and we all know it, but we all do. They want to basically make it that with masks on planes. They really want to have 1 or 2 places where they're in control, where you have to comply because they say so and because they're lunatics. But there are places right now that are still requiring Smith College, a place that I actually know a bit about from my time as an Amherst student.
All girls, right?
All girls school.
Smith College.
Right down the all girls college. They would not like it to be called all girls. Or sorry, all women's college. Pardon me. Women's college. Although they changed their student constitution over 15 years ago to remove gender. So it was an all women's college that never refers to women in the student constitution because men who identify as women can actually go to and have been able to go to Smith for a long time.
Unbelievable.
It is a very left-wing place. They are requiring, Clay, updated to the month, or rather to the most recent iteration boosters. So you need to be on, I think it's shot 4 at this point. Is it shot 5?
I think they're on shot 5.
Is it shot 5 that they would require, or you might have some time to get 5? You probably need all 4 shots to go to Smith. There are other schools that fall into this category. Meanwhile, if you really want a sense of Looney Tunes, and hat tip to our good friend Carol Markowitz for putting this one out, New York City is ending the private sector vaccine mandate, but keeping in place the public sector vaccine mandate, and they just fired 850 teachers last week. None of this makes any sense. If we had a real media, every time Joe Biden started mumbling something and his vacant eyes were scanning the room, they'd say, "What do you think about this, sir? What's going on?" Or when Eric Adams, who was, I'll talk more about this, throwing the loudest concert I've ever heard in history in Times Square last night. You could hear it a mile away, and the city's burning, and he doesn't care, and we still have a vaccine mandate?
Next week is the big news here that I'm actually able to enter into a New York City building for work legally for the first time in years.
Yeah, that's right.
We think I might have fit the special exemption that the Yankees players got to play under because I'm traveling, with a talent from a place that's out of the New York City region. But this will be what a big day that's going to be next week when I walk into the studio legal for the first time in multiple years.
What do you want your hype music to be? Return of the Mac? You tell me. That's a great song.
It's a great song. I like Blur song too, the Woohoo song.
It's a great song.
Pretty phenomenal.
I agree.